Every year, there are a handful of wide receivers in fantasy drafts who go a few rounds too late. And it's not because they aren't talented or they haven't produced, it's just because the markets are overlooking them and not paying attention. And the markets are your league mates, your friends. And in this video, I'll be breaking down 5 wide receivers who, based on where they're going right now, could absolutely break fantasy football in 2025. And we're going to start with the Eagles' #1 wide receiver, an alpha wide receiver in the NFL the past few seasons, and that is A.J. Brown. He's been one of the most efficient receivers in the NFL since becoming an Eagle these past 3 seasons. You might be saying, oh, Sal, why? Of course a first-round wide receiver is going to break fantasy. But hold on right there. Because believe it or not, he's not going in the first round. He's not even going in the early second round. We'll get into it in a second, but let's break down what just happened last year and why people are overlooking A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown last year finished as a top 12 wide receiver for the 3rd straight season. A wide receiver one now for 3 straight years, basically averaging 17 fantasy points per game every single year since joining the Eagles. Really, nothing for A.J. Brown himself changed despite missing 4 to 5 games last year due to injury. And in his 12 full games, he averaged 17.6 fantasy points, which would have made him once again a top 8 receiver. So again, let me show you this again. The wide receiver 8, his first 2 years with Philly, last year wide receiver 12, but when you just look at his 12 full games, the one that he left early, you take that out, he was once again the wide receiver 8. So everything stayed the same, and last year, A.J. Brown was a top 10 pick in fantasy drafts. But this year, he's not, even though he ranked 2nd in the NFL in target share, one of the most elite roles in the NFL, 2nd in air yard share in terms of downfield targets. He was absolutely fantastic there. The problem was that overall, the offense for Philadelphia, and you can see here his deep targets just 39th, red zone targets just 44th. Of course, a piece of that is because this team, or A.J. Brown himself, was injured. And the other piece was because Philadelphia was one of the most run-heavy offenses, not just last year, they were #1 last year, but in NFL history, which obviously is an outlier when you're talking about being one of the most efficient running games in NFL history with a 2,000-yard rusher in Saquon Barkley. So that was going against A.J. Brown last year, but he still finished as a top 10 wide receiver in the games that he actually finished. And let's look at this tweet from PFF. Since 2022 for A.J. Brown, since becoming an Eagle, including the playoffs, he's #1 in PFF grades, #1 in receptions against single coverage, 1st in yards against single coverage, touchdowns, explosive receptions of 10 plus yards. This dude dominates single coverage. He's also very good against zone defenses. We don't really see, people like to believe that wide receivers get double coverage these days because prime Calvin Johnson and prime Julio Jones had a couple of double coverages, but really the NFL doesn't do it these days. The wide receiver 2s and 3s and tight ends on teams are too good to be able to do that. But overall, the picture I'm trying to paint for you is that last year, A.J. Brown was dominant. He just got hurt for a couple of games and his offense was running the ball nonstop. And this stat's pretty crazy. Like, this is one for the bars, like you can bring to your friends. A.J. Brown only had 97 targets last year, not even 100. Again, because of the injuries and rush heavy offense, he still went over 1,000 total yards. Insane. And I think this year, assuming that it's not going to be the most historic rushing offense once again, they're probably going to throw at least a little bit more, not rank dead last in passing attempts, even if they bump up to 25th, right? Still bottom half or bottom third of the league. It's only going to help the passing attack and A.J. Brown's targets. And that should bump up all the targets, not just his targets in general, but it's going to bump up those explosive plays, those cheap code targets when we're talking about 20 plus yard targets downfield, and the big one, the red zone targets. The red zone targets are what basically separates the #1 overall wide receiver in fantasy from like the wide receiver 15. Jamar Chase last year getting a bunch of red zone targets. Drake London down the stretch, right? You can see how much that improves their overall point per game finishes because the touchdowns matter. You look at the competition and they're basically running back the same team. I mean, you won a Super Bowl last year. Why not just run back the same team when it comes to the running backs, when it comes to the quarterback, of course, when it comes to the target competition, it's still Devonta Smith. It's still Jahan Dotson. It's still Johnny Wilson, right? All these guys are the exact same. It's still going to be Dallas Goedert, who's now another year older and seems to be sticking with the team. So same target competition that A.J. Brown has finished as a wide receiver 3 for 3 straight seasons, a top 8 wide receiver when healthy. And despite that, let's look at where he's currently going in drafts as of this recording. The 19th overall player, so the back half of the second round, as the wide receiver 10 in drafts right now. I would personally say, assuming no injury here, and we could basically say that across the board for all players when we're talking about analysis right now because A.J. Brown's currently healthy, this is probably A.J. Brown's floor, a late second round pick, which is why I believe he could break fantasy football. And I also believe, and I've totally switched my stance on this since this player was traded because it was that big of a trade. I'm talking George Pickens here. I think he could break fantasy football this year. And here's the thing. He's of course been frustrating for fantasy players over the past years. He's always been this sexy breakout target ever since he was a second round pick drafted by the Steelers coming out of Georgia with with some injury concerns, but he was a phenom in his freshman year at Georgia. So he's had these high expectations, but now it might actually come true in 2025 because he's finally escaped the Matt Canada in past years Pittsburgh Steelers offense, and in general, that Steelers offense. First, let's start with the metrics for Pickens, because in the past, like even in this Pittsburgh offense, he still earned some very strong targets as their wide receiver one in past years. Deep targets, he ranked 4th overall. Red zone targets, 15th overall. So when we take these, his 29 deep targets, his 16 red zone targets, he was top 10 in what I like to call cheat code targets. The targets, we talked about them earlier with A.J. Brown, that really push the needle forward for fantasy scoring. Downfield targets, your deep targets of 20 plus yards, and your red zone targets because they lead to touchdowns. And another stat to point out is that Pickens ranked 3rd in explosive play rate in terms of generating plays of 10 plus yards. Now, despite all of these great numbers and the awesome target quality he was earning, he still just had 11.7 fantasy points per game last year. And a big piece of this is because of the offense that he was in. He only had 3 touchdowns, a career low, right? The offense for Pittsburgh in general wasn't scoring touchdowns. They weren't passing the ball all that much. Their quarterback situation wasn't that great. They had Pickens, for the most part, just operating as a boundary receiver, not versatile. And you can go through these last couple of years in Pittsburgh with a Matt Canada offense. Last year, of course, he ends up getting fired, but this team still ranked bottom 10 in pass attempts per game and passing yards per game. And it actually gets worse if you keep going back to years before that. Basically, since Big Ben has left this team, this has been a bottom 5 offense the past 3 years in passing volume and passing yards. That's what George Pickens has been buried in. But now you literally flip the switch here, right? Flip the switch to Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys, an offense that when Dak Prescott has been healthy, almost every single year they rank top 10 in passing volume, whether you're looking at passing attempts, red zone passing when they get there, overall passing yardage. We could look back to Dak's last healthy season where he threw in 2023 35 times per game, 4th most in the league. He threw 265 yards per game, 3rd most in the league. Led the NFL in money throws. Those are big time throws if you look at PFF. This is player profile right here. Led the NFL in red zone passing. Overall, that season was a massively productive year. It was the year that CeeDee Lamb put up the 2nd best wide receiver season ever because Dak was throwing 590 times, 4,500 yards, was an MVP candidate. And now you're throwing George Pickens into this, who, that's fine if CeeDee Lamb is there. We know he's the number 1 receiver, but we've seen Dak Prescott support number 2 receivers as recent as 2 years ago in 2023 with Brandon Cooks, an older Brandon Cooks. We've seen it in other years when CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper were there, when Michael Gallup early on was having his breakouts before injury. And now when we look at the Cowboys off season, like Brandon Cooks is gone. If we look at what they did at the running back position, they lost Rico Dowdle, a player who quietly put up like 1,400 yards for them last year. They draft Jaden Blue in the 5th round, a 7th round rookie, a former quarterback in Phil Maffa, who's now a running back. They get Miles Sanders, Javonte Williams, all these kind of like journeymen / young running backs in free agency in the draft. Like none of those guys are saying we're going to run the ball a bunch this year. Instead, trading for a George Pickens, trading in the offseason as well for a Jonathan Mingo from the Panthers just kind of shows us like they're probably prioritizing the passing attack based on their offensive line moves as well, more pass blockers than run blockers. So assuming Dak stays healthy and he's going to throw another 550 to 600 times, yeah, the wide receiver 2 in George Pickens, who's in a contract year, is probably going to see a lot of target volume. We're talking 100 to 120 plus targets. He's not going to be the focal point of the defense. That will be CeeDee Lamb instead. This is a good spot for Pickens, who as of right now with CeeDee Lamb soaking up the attention. After that, Jalen Tolbert is flash at times, but he's probably better off as a wide receiver 3. Kevontae Turpin they re-signed, but he's a great special teams player and speedster. Then they traded for Jonathan Mingo, hasn't showed anything. Like none of these guys, right? Like we're talking through these guys. You can go to tight end Jake Ferguson, short to intermediate parts of the field, okay. Downfield in terms of like yards after the catch efficiency, it's been hit or miss depending on the season. I'm looking at this right now like it's clearly CeeDee Lamb number 1, probably sees 160 targets or so, maybe more, maybe leads the NFL, but Pickens should easily get 100 targets. And based on where he's currently going as the 73rd overall player, the wide receiver 38, which is crazy. Like there's definitely a situation where Dak Prescott leads the NFL in passing volume or passing yards per game, and George Pickens is the wide receiver 38. This is a steal in my opinion in like round 6 or 7 of your drafts. And just picture this, knock on wood that it doesn't happen. What if CeeDee Lamb misses time? Even if it's just 2 games. What if he misses 4 weeks? What if he pulls his hamstring or rolls his ankle and he's out 4, 5, 6 weeks? Now George Pickens is a top 12 wide receiver week in and week out. I think it's a mistake to be passing on George Pickens right now at his current cost. And I also think that there's 5 mistakes that fantasy players are making every single year. They're the most common mistakes that I see every year. So I put together a free 5-day email course to help you avoid making those mistakes so you can actually start getting to your playoffs and winning your league. So if you're interested in getting my 5-day fantasy course, again, it's completely free right now. You can just head to startwinningfantasyfootball.com. fantasybluprin.com, or you can click the link in the description below. If you want to take it one step further and actually win your league and use the tools that 10,000 other people have used, the tools that I use in all my drafts, the 2025 Fantasy Blueprint is currently available to help you dominate your draft and win week to week during the season. It's personally me helping you with the tools that I use. You can check it out at thefantasyblueprint.com. That is thefantasyblueprint.com. That is also linked down below. The next wide receiver who could break fantasy football this year is another veteran, and I don't care that he's 32 years old. I'm talking about Davante Adams, who's now on the Rams. And here's the thing. Sure, yes, Davante Adams is 32 years old, 32 and a half if you really want to say that about a grown man by the time the season starts. But let's just look at what this guy did in 2024, just last year. He averaged 10 targets per game. He was top 10 in fantasy points per game and top 5 in expected points per game. But it was actually even better than this, because when he left the Raiders, he got over his hamstring injury, if it was even real or not, or if he just wanted to use that to get off the team, who knows. But in his final 9 games right here, where he went to the Jets and was reunited with his old quarterback Aaron Rodgers, Adams averaged 20 fantasy points per game, 11 targets per game, and 86 yards per game. That is insane. He was a top 5 wide receiver with Aaron Rodgers last year, despite being 31 and a half, right, or 32 years old. And now he joined Sean McVay in what should be a top 10 offense overall with Matthew Stafford. McVay, year in and year out, always produces these high quality offenses. And odds are it's the best situation that Adams has been in for like 2 to 3 to 4 years, since maybe his last year in Green Bay. And this is somewhat similar to like the George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, except it's a little bit closer in terms of these guys' talent levels. I think CeeDee Lamb is well above George Pickens right now, although maybe that can shift a little bit. But Puka Nacua is obviously the biggest target competition for Davante Adams, but these guys win in different ways. They'll be used all over the formation. We could see what Adams win out of the slot. He's also going to go out on the outside, probably be an X receiver often. I do think Puka Nacua, who is a first-round fantasy pick for me, a top 10 overall pick this year, will be the priority in the offense, will be the guy to generate probably 10 targets a game. But I think Davante Adams will see less defensive attention on him and generate 7 to 8 plus targets a game. It really is a 1A and 1B in this offense with Cooper Kupp now gone. Like, they re-signed Tutu Atwell. Okay, fine. Jordan Whittington, who had an interesting rookie year. It was some ups, some downs. Overall, I think it was somewhat impressive. Other than that, like, I don't even know half of these names. Do you know this name? Mumfin, Xavier Smith, Quintus Cephas, of course, I remember him from the past. Like, I don't even know any of these other names. They're really putting all their eggs into the 2 wide receiver sets, run the ball maybe a little bit more as well. I think that's going to really help Davante Adams, especially with less target competition. And we just saw it last year. Matthew Stafford still has it. This offense still has it. Even with a banged up Puka Nacua, he was banged up, remember last year, and a very banged up Cooper Kupp, they still produced 2 number 1 wide receivers. Let me show you. When Puka and Cooper Kupp were healthy last year from weeks 14 to 10, they averaged a combined 42 and a half fantasy points per game, and both of those guys during that time were top 10 fantasy receivers. So now we get Davante Adams stepping into this Cooper Kupp role, except he's looked way more efficient and better, literally a top 5 wide receiver with Aaron Rodgers the second half of the year last year than Kupp looked at any point probably these last 2-ish years. And despite everything I've been saying right now, Davante Adams, as of this recording, goes as the wide receiver 18, probably a little bit low, but he's going as the 36th overall player, meaning the last pick of the 3rd round in 12-team formats, a 4th round pick in many formats right now. He's going after Marvin Harrison. That's a mistake. After Breece Hall, massive mistake. After Terry McLaurin and Tyreek Hill and Kyren Williams, his own teammate, and even Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think these are all massive mistakes for Davante Adams, who, yes, Puka Nacua will be the number 1, but he's dealt with his own injuries. He plays very aggressive, and that usually leads to him getting some bumps and bruises. And this combination is just too hard to pass up. A veteran coach in McVay, a veteran quarterback, Super Bowl winning quarterback in Matthew Stafford, a good O-line, and a veteran, one of the smartest receivers to ever play the game, Davante Adams. We'll go from a veteran receiver to now a 3rd-year receiver in Drake London, who just slowly but surely every single year is breaking out. And we just saw it happen last year. He was a 2nd-round pick. We were in on him all over the board in fantasy drafts last summer as a 2nd-round pick. He broke out. He's a 2nd-round pick again. We're back in on him. Because London is coming off of a massive 2024. I think I said this was his 3rd season. It's obviously he's entering his 4th season. He has played 3 seasons. He had 157 targets, a career best, 3rd most in the NFL last year, 100 receptions, over 1,200 yards. Everything looked awesome for him. And this was in a situation where he was dealing with Kirk Cousins, who during stretches last year ranked 31st in true completion percentage. Not great. And Cousins was tied for the league lead in interceptions, which always stalls your drives and your momentum, and it can lead to just maybe some mid-game changes, which doesn't help the offense's rhythm. But then Michael Penix took over for the final 3 games of the season, and these were Drake London's numbers with Michael Penix. 23 fantasy points per game. Insane. Averaged 13 targets per game and 117 yards per game. He had 2 touchdowns during this time. During that span, he was easily a top 5 wide receiver in volume, in overall fantasy production, even in yardage. And there was one week that really stood out. Week 18, it was this overtime game against the Panthers. Drake London goes for 18 targets. He had a 50% target share, 50% of his team's targets, 10 catches, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns from Michael Penix. Even the week before that, he had 13 targets. Of course, it's a small 3-game sample, but it just goes to show you, when you actually pair Drake London, a talented receiver, with a good role, that's what he had last year in Atlanta. In his first season with his offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson calling plays, who put him in the slot a lot more, who was able to scheme him production and get him the ball. So you put that talented player in a good system with a good coach, and then you actually gave him a quarterback who can complete passes at all levels of the field in Michael Penix. The dude exploded. Some fun stats were that Drake London ranked top 10 in red zone targets last year, and he had almost 40% of his overall team's production. And that's while playing on a team where Darnell Mooney broke out and Bijan Robinson was a massive productive player as well. So London looks like the guy who can maybe be the #1 overall receiver in fantasy. Obviously, I'm not projecting him for that, but he has that range of outcomes because he's getting overall volume, used in creative ways, and the red zone targets matter so much when it comes to being that top 3 wide receiver overall. You look at the competition heading into this year, nothing has changed. Really, nothing has changed. It's still a solid offensive line. It's the same backfield. It's the same literally the same wide receiver competition across the board. Ray McCloud, Darnell Mooney, Cordero Hodge. You go down to Kyle Pitts. As of right now, he's still on this team. There's some trade rumors out there. I don't think they're real at all. So exact same competition, second year in the system. He was the guy to rank #3 overall in targets last year, used in the slot. We're going to get to see it all again, except now hopefully we get a better offense that moves the ball downfield more often, scores from some explosive plays with the big arm of Michael Penix. And I just want to highlight this because it's insane. These are the overall targets. We've talked about him a couple times, 9.2 per game for Drake London, #6 in target share, so he was earning just a ton of his team's targets. This right here, though, 42.4% according to Player Profiler, his red zone target share. So when they got to the red zone and threw the ball, almost 1 out of 2 of those were going to Drake London. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. I can't even say it. Mind-bogglingly crazy. Made up a word there, too. That's how impressive it was. All this into account, Drake London currently goes as the 17th overall player, the wide receiver 9. This is basically where he was going last year in drafts. The dude was literally going here last year in drafts. He's now in his prime in terms of entering his 4th year in the NFL. Just showed that he's a dynamic receiver with the quarterback upgrade, and he's going in the same spot as last year. Make it make sense. Let's go to an even younger player now. I want to talk about a rookie in Tet McMillan, the 22-year-old, the first-round pick for the Carolina Panthers, who's probably the best wide receiver in this class. Yes, Travis Hunter's in the class as well. Hybrid cornerback wide receiver, right? Okay, up there, 1A, 1B. Lots of things to like about Tet McMillan. You could start with his production the past 2 years, 2023, 1,400 yards, then 2024, while dealing with an ankle injury for basically the whole season, puts up 1,300 yards. He was the only wide receiver in college football these past 2 seasons to have at least 1,300 yards in each year. And I just want to point out 2024 again because it was so impressive. He put up over 1,300 yards, 15.7 yards per catch, a career high 31% of his team's targets. So 3rd most receiving yards in the nation was this right here, this 1,319. Again, while having a bum ankle, 8 touchdowns as well. Everything on the line in terms of your NFL stock of being a first round and maybe a top 10 receiver, which he ended up going 8th overall, and he's just playing through injury. Like, he's going to do that for you. If he gets banged up, he's going to play through injury for your fantasy teams. We love that. Now, the one downside would be that last year the Panthers, as you can see right here, only ranked 3rd in passing yards per game. So they were down there with the Bears, with the Patriots. The nice thing is, similar to the Patriots and Bears, they've done a lot of things this offseason, and we saw towards the end of last season, the Panthers offense looked a lot better. Bryce Young looked a lot better. The offensive line all season long looked really strong, and it should be again this year. Dave Canales, the new head coach, got Bryce Young going, and that was without having any weapons to actually vertically threaten in this offense. They didn't have any of that. And they really still don't have any of that, except for the fact that they ended up adding Tet McMillan. So Tet McMillan is the easily the wide receiver 1 on this team. I mean, you have a 35-year-old Adam Thielen, so I don't really know how much he has left. He'll probably play in the slot. Xavier Legette maybe can take that leap this year as a late first-round receiver. Last pick, I believe, of the first round in last year's draft. Okay, fine. Other than that, Jalen Colker was an exciting player. I do think he'll be involved. Wouldn't be shocked if he actually starts to play in 3 wide receiver sets over an older Adam Thielen or Xavier Legette sometime this year. But if you're talking about the guy who from day one should earn 24 to 30% of the targets, it's going to be Tet McMillan here. I mean, the dude is 6'4", 212 pounds, runs in the 4.4s in terms of 40 time, had the college production, and now is on an ascending offense with a coach who has showed us he can get the ball into his playmakers' hands. And in terms of the offseason changes, like, not much here. They bring in Hunter Renfrow, wide receiver competition, mostly probably a locker room guy overall. In terms of the NFL draft, it's Tet McMillan and then a 6th-rounder, Jimmy Horn, who was a teammate of Travis Hunter's in college. Interesting overall there as well. But nothing really changes here. You're still getting an offensive line that heading into last year, they improved their interior offensive line a ton. It paid off. The running game looked good. That offensive line in general looked much improved. And as the year went on, Bryce Young behind it got more comfortable. Now, in terms of early reports, I mean, this is just like, training camp and practice stuff. It shouldn't really move the needle that much, but at least it's better than seeing negative stuff coming out. Right now, you can see some videos and highlights. His movement at nearly 6'5" is a treat to watch. Bryce Young and the Panthers will benefit from his talents. This is a beat reporter. And then you can see here some more talking. He looks smooth, easy to throw to, just like we thought. Head coach Dave Canales told reporters after Friday's outing of rookie minicamp. He goes on to just basically say, I think the kid looks awesome. He looks like a true #1 X wide receiver. All the things we were expecting. None of this should move the needle forward too much. It's just coach speak about a good top 10 pick in the NFL draft, but it's better than them coming out and being like, yeah, the rookie is slowly getting into things. He's a little raw, right? Things like that. So with all that information into account, Ted McMillan goes outside the top 50 overall players, the 51st overall player, a wide receiver 25 right now. Like, let's look at some of the guys who go ahead of him. Cortland Sutton, okay, that's fair. I would still rather have Ted McMillan. Alvin Kamara, give me Ted McMillan. Devonta Smith, give me Ted McMillan. Let's keep scrolling up here. Xavier Worthy, I want Ted McMillan. Marion Hampton, I want Ted McMillan. Rashee Rice is close. DJ Moore is close. Mike Evans, give me Ted McMillan. Like, this is pretty crazy how high we're going up. James Cook goes 15 picks before, more than a round ahead, easily Ted McMillan. Marvin Harrison is very close with Ted McMillan in my rankings, but he's 20 picks higher right now in ADP. Ted McMillan, because he's a rookie, because people still don't realize what was happening in Carolina, they looked really good at the end of last year, so did Bryce Young. I think they're just sleeping on the overall offense, specifically Ted McMillan. So these are 5 wide receivers who have the talent, the upside, the opportunity to absolutely smash their current average draft positions. I would recommend putting a star next to these players' names, as well as the 4 running backs in this video, the must-have running backs for 2025. This is like maybe the best video you can watch all off season in terms of the running back position. Be sure to check it out right here.